The most violent scene occurs at the beginning of the film. We see a deer being hunted and killed. It's killed by being stabbed repeatedly. You see its throat being slit. And all this happens in close-up. So you see very bloody hands, you see the bloody fur of the animal, you see the animal die. You also see a very bloodied knife. Then this killing, it turns out to be part of a ritual. Not only is it being killed to be eaten, but it's also being killed as part of this kind of coming of age ritual. So you see some very, very grubby children. One of them who is very, very dirty, his face is sort of marked with the blood of this animal, and then the father figure gets one of the organs of the animal raw and bloodied and proceeds to eat it. So this happens at the very beginning of the film, and you wonder what kind of direction this film is going to take, but it actually isn't quite as shocking, or it doesn't go to places that you expect from here. After this scene, it very much takes a turning point, and the violence kind of stops after that. The point the film is trying to make, in some ways, I think anyway, is about survival. And, you know, if we had to kill our own food in order to eat it, would we do it? And I think the answer for most of us is no, we wouldn't. This is the kind of film that sets up a lot of themes and a lot of questions throughout the film. It's probably the most thematically dense film I've seen probably in forever. There is so much to talk about in this film. So this is where you get the idea of where this film is going to go tonally, and in terms of discussion point, this scene sets it up very clearly. So you do see other kind of violent related episodes in the film. So you see children handling weapons, handling knives. You see a very small child deboning a kind of small furry animal. And you see animal carcasses and bones around. You see one small child wearing a fur quite frequently through the film. It's the fur including the head, so this child wears it as a headpiece. So if you're a bit squeamish about animals and fur and about animal skins, then be aware of that one for sure. Now the rest of it, there's the father figure in this film speaks very openly to his children. So for example, if one of the children asks him about rape, he answers, and he answers very specifically and with details about what that word is. So you can expect a lot of this in the film as well. Everything from genocide to child molestation to, you know, militant dictatorships, all of this kind of thing, capitalist rule is sort of touched on or discussed or, you know, treated openly in the film. Again, the point is it's you know, showing different types of parenting. If a child asks a complicated question, what do we do? Do we answer them honestly? Do we cover it up with a less shocking or a less honest answer? Which is the best answer? Maybe neither of them. Usually the parent is trying to protect their child one way or another. So this is a theme which is dealt with a lot in the film. Also, quite early on in the film, we find out that the mother figure has committed suicide. And again, this is treated very frankly in the film. The father explains quite specifically to the children that the mother slit her wrists, which is how she died. And again, there's a discussion which ensues about the idea of, you know, death and suicide and so on. So this is where I'd sort of, you know, kind of sum up the violence and I guess the blood and gore in the film. Nothing else particularly bloody or gory happens. You do see an incident, or a couple of incidents later on. You see someone slam against a rock wall and it looks like they've broken their wrist. And you also do see a girl fall off a high ledge later on in the film. You hear a very loud crack as this child hits her head, and then you see her in the hospital with a brace, like a head and neck brace, and then later wearing crutches. So you do understand that she was injured in this fall. Sex and nudity, as I said, everything is treated very frankly in this film. So you do see full frontal male nudity, and it's very much presented in a way of like, well, you know, it's nudity. That's what we have underneath our clothing. Big deal. And you see a small boy child quite frequently nude in the film. You only see him from the rear view. You never see the frontal view. There's a discussion that happens between a dad and his children about what sex is. And again, it's very matter of fact. He just explains the act of sex, what it's for, why people do it, and what actually happens. And you see a small child reading a copy of The Joy of Sex at one point in the film. Alcohol and drugs. There isn't a huge amount of alcohol or drugs in the film. You see people drinking beer and wine, and you see quite a bit of like beer and wine like in the background or on tables. I mean, one scene is set in a supermarket, and you see, walking through a wine aisle. So you see lots of bottles of alcohol on the shelves. You do see there's some children drinking wine, so there's underage drinking, and there is one younger girl, perhaps a kind of an older teenage, ish years, who is smoking in one scene during the film. Drugs, you don't see any drug use in the film, but there's a mention of crack and crackheads, and I think marijuana might be the other one, but they're just mentioned. You don't actually see any drugs take place in the film. Finally, offensive language. The F word and S words are both used a few times, but that's about it. There's a few other kind of derogatory terms which are used, but the language actually isn't too bad in this film. As I said, this film is all about the themes. The themes, and it's so far-reaching. I mean, really, I'd need another video to talk about the different themes and discussion points that you can take out of this film. For me, the big ones are really just about parenting, how we parent, how we communicate with our children, and the idea that it doesn't matter what your intentions are, it still comes back to the core thing that you can't escape from, which is that you're still asserting your own beliefs and your own wants and desires and hopes on that child. Whether your intentions are good or how good they are doesn't seem to matter. It's all about we are still shaping our children, and we need to, I guess, be aware of that and how that will affect our children growing up. And other themes and other issues such as what a real world education is. How do we define that? I mean, is a real world education going to school, learning out of a textbook, being able to quote from Middlemarch or from, some controversial literary texts? Or is it knowing how to respond to a girl when she flirts with you? So these are the sort of things that come up during the film, and I found it wonderful to watch. I mean, the discussion points afterwards and the conversations I had were just so wonderful, and they lasted for a few days. Myself and a few other people just talked, for the next few days about different ideas that we had and different things that we got out of the film. So personally, I really, really enjoyed it. Viggo Mortensen is just remarkable in this film. All the children actually, all the cast are remarkable. It's worth watching just for the performances, but go in with an open mind if you can, because this is the film I think you'll either love or hate. If you have very strong beliefs, particularly if you have very strong conservative beliefs, then you'll probably find this extremely frustrating. But then, perhaps you'll find plenty to talk about. If you do see the film, please leave me a comment below and let's talk about what you found to be frustrating or wonderful or thought-provoking about this film. A full breakdown obviously is on the website, which is cinemum.net.